Okay, well, preemptive strike. Nearly done with TNG. Nearly. So this is one of those like extra Maquis episodes where um Picard legitimately has someone give him a bad day because someone really seriously double crosses Picard. That doesn't happen till the end of the episode, but it's one of those things in this episode where you see Picard in a position where he doesn't end up in that position very often. Anyways, so the basic gist of this one is that the Maquis are causing even more problems in the Cardassian DMZ. The specific Maquis cell that is the focus of this episode was one where, much like several of the other Maquis cells, they were living on a planet that used to be Federation territory. Then the Federation ceded that territory to the Cardassian Union, and now the people who built the colony on that planet are now stuck in Cardassian territory, and as Federation citizens, they were supposed to leave, but they chose not to. Now, this is one of those episodes that is essentially a sort of political commentary about, the harsh reality of what happens when governments decide to buy and sell territory as if it's, numbers on a spreadsheet and blah 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 blah. Well, yeah, okay, true. But on the other hand, the governments involved aren't actually doing it on a whim. Because one of the things that you find out when you seriously look into the whole reason for the DMZ and the reason why the Federation had that territory is that neither the Federation nor the Cardassian Union had actually respected the concept of territorial boundaries when they were building colonies in this area. And thus the, border functionally didn't exist. There was this blended area where there was Cardassian and Federation colonies scattered like toys, and no one had drawn a line on the map saying which side either party belonged on. So functionally, people were just doing both. Yeah. Again, one of those political commentary things, because in reality, a lot of people would rather not have territorial boundaries in real life, except that not having territorial boundaries doesn't really fit with the whole concept of having nations. Yeah, bit of a problem there. So, anyways, where does this episode actually go specifically? This one, the specific catalyst is our friend Gul Evek returns. And Gul Evek and his ship have been attacked by a group of Maquis. Which, yeah. Now, one thing about this is where was Gul Evek when they were attacking him? Well, near the Jiraiya colony, which is in. Yeah, I don't really get the whole why is Picard going to some place that's supposedly on the Cardassian side of the neutral zone. I don't get that part, but whatever. I guess it's solely to, help. Anyways. Yeah, one thing with this whole thing is that um, the Maquis were becoming a big enough problem that the Cardassians were going to be forced to, take military action. And that is something that was undesirable because of the fact that taking such an overt action could be seen as violating the treaty. Although technically it's only allowed under certain specific circumstances, and establishing those is hard. And of course, a lot of the time, when you have certain specific circumstances required, you will end up with long, drawn out arguments about which side actually had the specific circumstances that they needed and which one didn't, and so on and so forth. Anyways, so what is up with this colony? Like I said, this is not really a particularly important colony other than the fact that it has a Maquis cell on it. Cardassian side of the DMZ, used to be a Federation colony, blah, blah, blah. Already mentioned all that stuff. Now, this is interesting because the fact that Cardassians had been, smacking them around a bit. Which is, in some ways, understandable, but it's kind of goes against the spirit of the treaty, which is one of those things that comes up a lot in this. Is like it's has a lot of discussion about the concept of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and which of the two is actually being served by the Federation's interest, and which is more in line with the Cardassians' interests, and whether or not the Maquis are actually honoring the law at all. Yeah. Thing is, though, most of this stuff gets touched on as reasons for plot to happen, but not really explored in depth. Which, honestly, for a TTRPG, you wouldn't likely end up with a deep, thought-provoking conversation because that's just not what TRPGs are for, as a general rule. Anyway, though, so this episode actually has quite a lot of guest cast. We already met Gul Evek. He is a guy who has been in several episodes before this one, and this wasn't even the last time we saw him. One of the Cardassian characters who is, a reasonably nice guy, and someone, as a result, who we see in several episodes doing Cardassian things for Cardassian reasons. It's not, it's not unexpected to see him, I guess is the best way to put that. So, who else we have? Because new people, yeah, these are characters who are part of the Maquis cell. Older gentleman who, was one of the founding settler types, and what is one person who is particularly connected to the colony because he seemingly helped build it or something, and had been, living there for longer than most. And then we have Kalita. Again, someone who, Maquis because actually I don't know that they actually properly explained why she was a Maquis. See, because Macias they did, but in her case, she seems to have been there more to be the person who was looking for spies inside the Maquis because she knew that organizations like the Cardassian Union and the United Federation of Planets really didn't like the fact that the Maquis existed. They knew that both sides in the treaty didn't like them, and thus she was constantly worried that the Federation was going to send spies to infiltrate them. And she had this guy helping her look for spies. And the two of them somehow conclude that Laren is in fact not a spy. Okay. Thing is, though, is that Laren does end up joining the Maquis. So they were kind of right in that regard. Yeah. So, anyways, these two characters here are not really all that important, honestly. They're members of Macias's cell, but Macias is the main person who's the cell member, although he dies, and that his death gets to be an important part in uh, convincing to betray the Federation and join the Maquis. Which, as people have pointed out in previous episodes, a lot of the Maquis members are former Starfleet officers who, you know, decided they would rather help the settlers in their colonies than, be Starfleet officers. Anyways, um, the plot of this one is actually a really, really simple one. Because of the fact that the gist of it is that Ro is here to try to figure out what the Maquis cell is doing because they've been attacking Cardassian ships. Like I mentioned before, it's like they were seemingly trying to blow up Gul Evek's ship at the beginning of the episode. And Picard and his crew are doing an intel operation to try to um, bait them into a situation where they can be taken prisoner so that the Federation can send them to a penal colony or something. Anyways, though, that obviously doesn't work. One thing that's interesting about this is that the logic they have as the bait is someone planted the idea that the Cardassians were going to use biogenic weapons to kill the humans in the colony. This is apparently a lie, but the Maquis believe it and use it as a reason to engage in further violence. Yeah, that not sure that was a good strategy to take. Anyway, though, so using this in TTRPG, because ultimately that's the goal behind the whole thing. This is an episode where there's enough skullduggery that the whole point of your game session would be having players engage in skullduggery, either with other players or with NPCs. But the entire episode is about skullduggery. Like, there's no ship to ship combat or anything like that. well, okay, very little. Technically, there was a firefight at the beginning of it, but the Enterprise shows up and basically tells the Maquis ships to go away. And they do! They decide that they would rather not try to fight the Enterprise. This is an interesting thing that comes up a lot with Maquis stuff, is that the Maquis know that the ships that they're using, while they are functional starships, are not top-of-the-line combat vessels. So they will do things that a proper military vessel isn't going to do. What exactly it is in this particular case, well, that depends on which Maquis cell it is and what for starship they happen to pull up. All right, so closing thoughts. Um, this is a template you could use for a relatively espionage heavy episode. I wouldn't necessarily go with the Maquis when writing an espionage heavy episode, because there's an awful lot of other organizations you could use. Heck, you could make up a new DMZ and make up a new organization. And ultimately, making up your own stuff would actually be a good idea for stuff like this. Because, as I mentioned several previous videos, having the players actually try to act out an episode is probably not going to work. Because, like, with this episode, the variety of alternate paths you could theoretically take getting from point A to point B is rather large, actually. It's not the sort of episode where the plot needs to follow an exact path. Although you do kind of sort of want to go in the same general direction, there's a lot of different ways you could go about it. One of which would be, changing who is attempting to infiltrate the Maquis. Because we kind of sort of only really had two people working on that, Riker and Ro. That's it. Anyway, yeah. Um, not one of the. Oh, there is actually one other thing in this episode that's kind of cool, and that is the whole token system thing. Uh, because it is the star system doesn't really contain anything all that interesting. However, due to the nature of the star system being parasitic, it's giving off weird sorts of energy, which make it difficult to detect ships. So it acts as a kind of sort of mask so that people can park starships in this system and have them be very difficult to find, solely because of the fact that it messes up long range sensor scans. You know, it's a plot element that you can rather easily use, uh, even when it's not an espionage focused game. All sorts of reasons to have players look for things in people and stuff. Alrighty then. Well, I'll see you guys later.